There's a couple of things that like I wrote down from the book that like even like small ideas, I guess, or just sentences. But just the idea you write that discipline is freedom, that like that is, and when you're reading it, you kind of stop and you're like, oh yeah, the person who just indulges in everything, that we're like led to believe that's who's having a good time.
Yes.
That's the happiest guy.
Sure.
And that the disciplined guy, he must be bored and miserable that he's going to bed at 9 or whatever and getting up and doing his work. And then, I don't know, just the way that you write it, it like lights you up and you go, oh, right. The truly, the free one is the guy who actually adheres to his routine and his schedule and isn't just tempted and indulging in all these things, whether it's food and sex and drugs. Like, I don't know, that really, it's touched upon a few times in the book, but that really is a big concept to embrace, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just like, hey, if you work really hard, then one day you'll have like financial freedom and security to do whatever you want. Although that's also true. Yeah. It's more that like, I think people think like routine, structure, limits, like this is when I do this is when they think that that's limiting or constraining, but it's actually that gives you the creative freedom to fuck around and experiment and take risks. Yeah. Like if your life is a mess, you don't have the ability to be creative and chaotic in the work the way that you think that you do. Mm-hmm. Or like conversely, like I say no to lots of stuff, and then like what that means is I have like a calendar that's empty where I get to do the stuff that I want to do.
That you want to do. Yeah.
And so
but to the discipline too, it's like when you write something about who do you think's happier? You write something, I'm paraphrasing here, about who's happier, the guy that's like stuffing his fucking mouth and it's sick, or the person that actually knows when to say no and it basically is disciplined about how they conduct themselves. And it's like, oh yeah, I mean, when you read it in that way, it's one of those things where it's like a slow nod. You're like, yeah, of course that's who's happier.
Well, it's funny because the rival of the Stoics was the Epicureans. These are the two schools in the ancient world. The Stoics are supposedly like very strict, have a lot of discipline. It's about hard work and virtue. And then the Epicureans, even then, but now the word Epicurean means like a lover of food, a lover of pleasure, a hedonist. That's what the Epicureans are. That's the rival school. But even Epicurus, who Seneca quotes all the time, he's saying that like basically any pleasure that has a hangover is not a pleasure. Yeah. Or anything taken to the point where you then regret some or all of it later, that has to be included in the calculation as to whether this was fun or good or not. Mm-hmm. Like you had an awesome night last night and then you wake up and the next day is awful because you feel terrible, you're throwing up all day, you have to apologize to people, or your marriage falls apart, or all of that has to be like you have to put that in the calculus as to whether this is actually
it's not just it was an awesome night. It's like, we tell the full story.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And likewise, like if discipline is hard and requires a certain amount of sacrifice, but then afterwards you're proud of yourself, afterwards you look yourself in the mirror, afterwards you can do what you want, like that also has to be, actually wasn't that hard. Right. Because, hey, I get to coast on this for a long time.
How you feel after any of your choices has to be a part of the equation. Yes. And for some reason, a lot of us don't.
Well, I think the mind, from an evolutionary standpoint, that makes sense, right? Like your body, your genes want you to do certain things that are maybe good for your reproduction or whatever, or your immediate gratification or benefit, but then like it's like the consequences are someone else's problem, but that someone else is just future you. Yeah. And so I think it makes sense. Like the part of your, like when you accomplish something and you go, wow, this is really cool, but by the way, it didn't actually make me feel happy, or it didn't make my dad proud of me, or any of the things that we sometimes tell ourselves like success is going to bring us. Like we think the external stuff's going to fix internal problems, right? Which it never does.
Yeah.
The part of your brain that realizes that, like when you're getting the gold medal or getting the applause or cashing the check, the part of your brain that realizes that then immediately forgets it, you can see why that's good from like a evolutionary standpoint. Because it's like, if we ever actually learned that lesson, like as a species, we'd stop doing stuff. And so the mind is really good at tricking us into like, okay, one Super Bowl was great. But like, I think about Kevin Durant, like, okay, it was great to win these rings with the Warriors.
Yeah.
But like, you won't really feel good about yourself unless you do it in New York, which of course has been the biggest catastrophe like in the history of sports.
Yeah.
That's what keeps people, well, what's over that mountain? Like, what's over that mountain? Like, so it makes sense. It's just, and it's good on a species level, but it's probably not good for you, the individual.
Yeah. And that's a huge lesson that you learn. I mean, the about success is that, you know, I remember being like a broke comic and being like, hearing about what comedians who sold out a club would make. And I was like, that's the fucking craziest thing. That's
all I need.
Yeah. And like, that is so much money. And I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Like, and also if I did do that, I would feel happy, fulfilled. People would respect me. People who doubted me would learn their lesson. You know, like you go through like all the things. So like that would be the thing.
Yeah.
Then you get there and it happens and you're like, oh, none of that happened. Also, they're like, well, now you can go do theaters. And you're like, oh, it's theaters.
Sure.
So then you go do theaters. Then you do theaters and they're like, your ad shows and they're like, you can do arenas. So then you go do arenas.
And then, did you hear so-and-so did a stadium?
And I got pitched a stadium thing. And I'm like, I don't even like, I'm like, it's not that, here's the thing. It's better. I want to be honest about it. It's better than being broke and not being successful. So getting to a level of success is better than than having none, let's say, right? Of course. But it does not solve any of those feelings inside of you. It does not fulfill you. You don't go, I'm now complete. I am now happy. Everything, like all the things that you thought that you would feel, they just don't happen, you know? And I've heard people who have, I'm sure you've heard the stories of people who have reached like these unimaginable levels of success who I've never heard, like,
it did it.
They go, there's nothing up here. They always say, they're like, there's just nothing here.
Yeah.
They look around and they're like, no, just same thing.
And it would be wonderful if you could learn that from other people, but you can't. And that kind of sucks. But to me, it's well, I remember when I dropped out of college, I got this job as an assistant at a talent agency, and it was 30 grand. That's what I got paid. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do with all this money? You know? So like, I try to remember that, like whenever I get paid for stuff, it's like $30,000 was once an obscene amount of money to you. You could have your own apartment. You could buy any book that you wanted when you wanted it. You could eat it Carl's Jr. or whatever. Like life was good, you know? And so like keeping that perspective is really important. But I think also where I've gotten to is like, okay, so you've done the things, whatever the heights of your profession are. Like in mine, it's like, where have you hit on the bestseller list, or if you sold a certain number of copies, or just like my dream was like, could I publish one book, like one real book? I've done that 15 times basically. Jesus. So it's like, you've done it. So then to me, it becomes, can you enjoy doing it? That would be the form of success, but that a lot of people have never had.
Let me ask you this, because that expression is said over and over. They're like, and people who are further along than you and older than you, they'll go, don't forget to enjoy it. What does enjoy it mean though?
Well, why don't we just start with not fucking hating it while you're doing it, right? Like there's a expression, painters like painting, writers like having written.
Right.
Like being done with it is nice, but doing it is torturous. And so like part of it for me is can you do it really well and not hate it while you're doing it? Like, can you enjoy, hey, today I got 1,000 words in. I think I put some things together that have never been put together before, and that was pleasurable and that was good. But part of the way I don't just think like, hey, you should enjoy yourself, like that cliche. I think about it as one of the Stoic exercises is memento mori, like meditating on your mortality. And what I came to think is like, I could die before this book comes out. Obviously, this was heightened a little bit in the early days of the pandemic when nobody knew anything. But just think about it. It's like you could be almost done with a special or a book or a project, and then you could get hit by a bus, right? So like the work that you're putting in can't be predicated on only having been worthwhile if you live to see it come out and it does well. So like, how do you, so first off, you're like, okay, I'm not going to predicate it on whether it does well or not. I'm just going to be proud of it. And then you're like, actually what's not in my control is even whether I see it complete. So what is in my control right in this moment, it's like, what is the contribution that I make today? And so I think about it on that level. Like, did I have, fun is a shitty word, I guess, but like, was today an enjoyable, worthwhile, contributive bit of work? And like, that's the building block that I try to work on, as opposed to like, this is horrible and I hate it and my personal life's a mess, but it will all be worth it when 18 months from now, X happens.
Right. Then it's over. And then I'll look back on all these times where I was cursing every day about this bullshit I have to go through. Yeah. Okay. That is good.
I talked to it's in the afterword of the book, but Manu Ginobili lives in San Antonio. He and I are friends, and we were having lunch one day at my bookstore, and he was saying like that he lost it's basically he went up for a rebound, Chris Bosh gets it, they lose in the NBA Finals to the Heat. And he was like, I've never been less happy than when we lost the NBA Finals. And then he was like, but also like my whole dream was to like play in the NBA Finals. Like that sucks that like being able to enjoy being in the NBA Finals is predicated on whether we win or lose. Yeah. That's like, because what if the team is bad, or what if you blow out your knee, or any number of things. And so to me, it's like, it was just realizing like the way to do the work is to be so the Stoics have this phrase, you said it's better to be like rich and successful than not rich and successful. Yeah. They have this phrase, they say like, basically everything that's not in your control is an indifferent. Not indifference, but is it indifferent? Meaning it's not up to you, so it doesn't matter. But they said there's also such things as preferred indifference. So like your height is not in your control, but like it's better to be tall than short, right? Or it's better for people to love the special than hate the special. Yeah. And so if you're going to have one, if you could choose, you would choose one, but getting to a place where you actually are pretty indifferent to it. Like you're like, I love it. I think it's really good. I enjoy doing it. So it's successful the day before it premieres. Yeah. And then when it does premiere, obviously you want to be number one and you want to hit all the benchmarks and win all the prizes, but like that's extra on top of the other things that were in your control. That is true. Cause the times, that's a great point. The times that I've been like, I'm proud of this. Yeah. That feels like a success already. But before anybody, like if I go, I'm down, I dig this. This is good. That feeling is actually better. It's a better feeling than the other person telling me that was good. It's like, yeah, I know. I love this thing. In New Orleans, they have a word lagniappe, which means like the 13th donut. It's just the extra. Like you don't control it. It's not predictable, but like when you get it, you're like, fuck, yeah, that's great. That's pretty good. And that's kind of like Discipline sold fastest of any of my books, which was not at all expected. But also like, I feel like I did work in that it was like it was a pleasant surprise when I found out. Cause I didn't even really like check. Really? Like, yeah. Bert and Tom and Bert. One goes topless while the other wears a shirt. Tom tells stories and Bert's the machine. There's not a chance in hell that they'll keep it clean. Here's what we call two bears, one cave.